Okay, it's May the 23rd, 2018, and we're in the kitchen of Basil George's house in Ogwr village, and he's going to tell us a bit about his memories of the period of the Second World War. Basil, can I start by asking you how old you were when war broke out?
10 and a half. Coming up to 11 in the December, see. And we were living at that time then in Pen-y-bont, in Reading, next to Reading, with my father's work. And I happened to be a member of the Pen-y-bont church choir. And that's where I heard that there was a war on, when a gentleman came in and spoke to the vicar and informed the congregation that war had been declared. Well, I went home then and spoke to my parents, who hadn't heard that the war was on. Obviously they hadn't had the radio on or something. And I said, well, you know, being a child, I said, well, what a day to start a war. It was on a Sunday. You'd have thought that they waited until Monday. But that's where it's at. Of course, boys of my age at that time were over the moon, because this was the most exciting thing that has ever happened. But my father and mother and all their friends, they were not tickle pink over it. They knew what was coming. But there we are, as I say, that's my introduction to 1939-45 war.
So you moved then, your family moved down to Bridgend, did they?
Yeah, we came back then. We had gone from here in January 39 up to Pen-y-bont, and we came back here in 1942. And by that time I was gainfully employed with my father then, working.
What were you doing?
I was driving a tractor for the Berkshire War Agricultural Executive Committee.
How was that in Pen-y-bont?
That was in Pen-y-bont, and I had a special piece of paper telling me, or to be shown to anyone questioning, a 14-and-a-half-year-old boy driving a tractor on the King's Highway, that I had permission to do it for food production through the coming years. So I've been driving on the road since I was 14 years and 2 months.
All right.
So, and then in 1942 my grandfather wanted us to move back because my grandmother had passed away, and we moved back down here then to where it all started.
Where were you living?
I was living in Glanarvon in a house in Pen-y-bont, my grandfather's house. And I was born across the water here, the river in Merthyr in the schoolhouse. So really, we had just gone from here for a couple of years and come back then.
So you went to work for Merthyr Estate then?
I went to work for, when I came down here then, the Glamorganshire War Agricultural Executive Committee wouldn't take a 14-year-old, 15-year-old boy to drive a tractor. So I had to find work, and there was no shortage of work, and I went to work on the Merthyr Estate, just as a cowman, pigman, you name it, that's what I had to do. So you saw all what was going on around here with the services and all the rest of it. Police were pretty... There was a policeman in every village in that time, wasn't it? There was one in Iweni, there was one in Southerndown, there was one in St. Bride's. So it was a different ball game altogether, like, you know, what it is today.
And you went every day then to work on the estate?
Yeah, I used to cycle every morning from Iweni to Merthyr. One of the highlights that I can remember well was the fact that we didn't know that it was coming up to D-Day, but we were reminded shortly after, going to work from the New Inn Road. They used to call it Westfile Road. Now it's New Inn Road, and that is from Iweni to Merthyr. And over a period of some 3 or 4 days, the road was taken over by the army and turned into an ammunition dump. And there was sufficient room in the centre of the road to drive a lorry through. There was a couple of places where they just made a sort of passing area. But in the main, the whole road had ammunition in boxes stacked about 7-8 foot high either side, and all camouflage netting over the top of it, you see. And we had this special pass to go through there. Nobody, the general public couldn't go through there. But because I was working in Merthyr Mawr on the bike, I had this piece of pass.
So there was a sentry, was there,
yeah,
by the railway bridge?
Two sentries either end, and they stopped everybody from going through there. And then one night, it must have been in the May part of 44, I think it was. I came home as I normally do and passed the niceties to the sentries as we went by, and the following morning I went there and there wasn't a thing there. Now this amazed me and a lot of people, how on earth they shifted all that in one night. Where it went, of course, we didn't know until a few days later when we read in the papers and the news that D-Day had started. And in that period there were tremendous manoeuvres around the Wen-y, St Bride's and Ogwr area with tanks and Bren gun carriers, armoured vehicles and all the rest of it. And they all disappeared one night. And then, as I say, D-Day happened the following day or so, and that's the last we saw them.
When the Americans were here then, driving their vehicles around, was there anything different about the way they dealt with things to the way the British dealt with things?
There was a lot of things, but the one that stuck in my mind was by the Dipping Bridge as you go from Wen-y to the A48. The British Army had got an area where they washed their vehicles down, and they had a little Jap pump, a water pump, and they'd start this thing up, and they were everlasting running out of petrol with it. But anyway, they had this pump and a 3/4 hose pipe, I suppose, to wash their vehicles down. And then the Americans turned up. Now they were a different ball game altogether, because they came in with a big D8, a Caterpillar. They made a ramp into the river this side and the ramp the other side, and then they hit the water at about 35 miles an hour and the mud went off them, no trouble at all. So there was no hose pipes or anything like that, it was just a big whoosh of water. And it did seem to me that the Yanks, I use the word Yanks because that's what it was, they always seem to do things in a very big and different manner to what the British Army did.
No messing around with the hose pipes?
No.
You worked up on Stalling Down, did you?
Yeah,
Stalling Down at Cowbridge. What were you doing there?
This was at the latter part of the war, and the county had about 20 acres of potatoes up there. And the county Warag offices in Cardiff used to manage big pieces of ground for producing food. And standing down, this is on the left going from Cowbridge to Cardiff. It's all common ground now, but it was ploughed, and I ploughed it at one time. It was 21 acres there. And with a crop of potatoes in there, and we had the German prisoners there. And to be quite honest with you, the German prisoners were a nice bunch of people as far as I was concerned. They always give me the impression they were doing the war as our boys were doing. They were sticking to the orders and doing what they told to do.
So they would be prisoners who were doing a work detail then, was it? And they were working on the farm.
Yeah, they'd come out on the farms, you see, and right through harvesting and all that. They'd be on haymaking, corn, and then of course after the corn, then they do it on.
And how many they come by? How would they come up?
There's a lorry which would bring them up.
And how many would there be on the lorry?
About a dozen, with one sentry. And the first thing they did when they came on site, which I thought was very accommodating, was one of them was detailed to be the chef. And he was a very good chef because he made a meal out of whatever he had every day, and fed us all. We had a tin plate and a fork, and that was it. Well, this particular day, and there was this fella Heinz Wallmaker, I think his name was, but nevertheless he spoke beautiful English, and his job prior to the war was a censor for all English books coming into Germany. And he spoke better English than I did. And he asked me one day if there was a possibility if he could catch a couple of rabbits, because there was countless rabbits running down around the common. I said, yeah. I said, being a young lad knowing what to do, I brought a couple of wires in one morning and I set them up in the evening before we went. But unfortunately, the following morning the fox had been around and he'd had the rabbits, so I had the brainwave now of bringing a 410 folding gun to work, and I wrapped it in a sacking, tied it to the bar of the bicycle, and I got up there and I was cycling then from Iweni to Stallingdown and being on the job at 7:30, so I was leaving the house about 6:30, and I got up there, quick as a flash, had the gun out, bowled 4 rabbits over, skinned them and gutted them, skinned them, and I put them on the sack, on a bag of spuds there when they arrived. Oh, they were over the moon now to see these. But the little sentry with him, he wanted to know how I caught him. Oh, I said, I shot him. You shot him? Do you have a gun? I said, yeah, of course I got a gun. Where is it? So I says, on the bar of the bicycle. But he said, you can't have a gun. These are prisoners. Well, I said, you got a gun. And he said, yeah, but I've only got 1 bullet. And I got a sign for that, he said. So I said, well, they're not going to do nothing. I said, oh, don't bring a gun with you again. Anyway, we solved that. I had a bit of a dodge to put these wires down, and I saved them from the fox after that. But we lived very, very comfortably. It was roast rabbit, boiled rabbit, you name it, but we lived on rabbit and potatoes for some time.
The Americans left materials behind that you took advantage of as well.
Oh yeah, there was just after the war, it would be within months of after the war, the Hermitage Wood down here at the back of Iweni, the Avon River stream flows down, and just by the old bridge there was a pool which us boys used to swim in. It wasn't an Olympic-sized pool, but it was one of these you could jump in and have a soak, and a fire would be going, and afterwards we'd have baked potatoes or something or other, and they'd make an evening of it. And there would be a gang of us of about 10 or 14, I suppose. And this particular night we had a fire going, and the boys were collecting firewood about that. And one of them came down and he said, hey, there's a trap door up here on the bank. Well, we all went up in swimming trunks now, and we found this trap door, lifted it up, and there it was. Steps going down into waters. It's there now, the old quarry is. It was a quarry, and what the Yanks had done, they had fitted it out, put a soil roof over the top of it, and it was an ammunition dump. Well, one of the boys said to me, let's get in and have a look. And there we found now boxes of hand grenades. Now, we didn't have a lot of health and safety to worry about, but we did have an element of common sense. And one of the fellas, who I always remember, he went after that as the name of Dynamite Bevan. He was a boy the same age as me, which would have been 16, 17 then. He said, well, to make these alive, he said, we got to find detonators. Now, the whole thinking behind this was that if we had a few of these hand grenades, and we all pulled the pins out, because we had read about what you had to do to pull the pins out, and throw them into this pond, this pool, it would deepen it. So there were 6 of us there now, and we all had 2 each. put these wicks and this detonator inside, screwed the top down, and put the bar down, and we held this thing now, but didn't put the split pin in the bottom. Now, bearing in mind, months earlier, there were people killing one another with these things, but we are going to use them to deepen the pool. Well, I can honestly say now that, and I often recall it with the people that were there, a lot of them are gone now, admittedly. When we given that 1, 2, 3, we all threw them in. There must have been 12 hand grenades went into this pool at the time. Well, a column of water, we all got behind trees and all this, and I have the distinct feelings to this day of having a look, because I thought that they'd all gone foot down in the water, but no. There was this boulder coming at my head at about 90 miles an hour. I stood behind this ash tree, and the tree is still there to this day. And the water went up, must have been 100 foot in the air. I don't know if it stopped coming down for 3 days, but anyway, there was an explosion that was deafening. It didn't deepen the pool, I can assure you that. What it did, it took us 3 weeks to empty it with all the stones that fell into it. But about 2 nights later, the local policeman, Mr. Murphy, came up and wanted to know if we'd heard any noise or something, because there was an explosion reported in the village the other night. And of course, no, Mr. Murphy, not a word, no. But after he'd gone, we did come to this thing, we'd better tell somebody, because this night, Dynamite Bevan fella, his father, I think, was either a special policeman or his uncle was. So we left it to him, and the following night the whole wood was closed down. There was army there for weeks, and they could tell us afterwards they'd found another ammunition dump further up the wood, all primed with a 6-volt battery, and all they had to do was cross the wires and blow the lot up. But luckily for us, we never found them, and otherwise we might have tried it, I don't know.
So the Americans had gone
They had
and left this storage there without getting rid of it.
And in point of fact, if it wasn't for the fact that this lad was gathering sticks, we would never have found it, because everything had grown over it. And but they came down, I suspect, with the army, and they had all the technology to do the whole wood then, and they found another one then. But no, that was a period of the time when, it was an exciting time. Yeah.
Well, it was even more exciting, wasn't it, when you went up to Stormy Down to the airfield?
Yeah, well,
that was after the war as well.
That's right. I was now working for the Glamorgan War Agricultural Executive Committee, and they had the job of cutting the airfield and making hay on there. And there were a gang of us up there, but there were 3 of us on the job for the whole summer. 2 of my colleagues have passed away now, Ray Cottrell and Sid Jenkins, and the 3 of us were up there. And there was 6, I think it was, 6 gliders parked out on part of the aerodrome. And Sid said to me one day, "We ever flown one of those things?" I said, "No, but I know how to fly them, because I used to have the Boy's Own or something, a comic or something it was, and it used to tell you in there how to fly these things." So I had a fair idea. So on the Saturday afternoon, and I think it was a Saturday because I think the cadets used to come up there on a Sunday. Well, on the Saturday afternoon, we got one of these lined up, and you had a winch that was about 500 yards away with a very small hawser or wire rope, fixed it to this glider. And Sid now was in the winch and given the sort of thumbs up. Ray was holding the wing up so that the thing was level, and I was in the gadget. And with that he put it into gear, and no sooner I had gone, I was airborne. But what I had forgotten to do, to my embarrassment, I hadn't pulled the knob on the left hand side to release the wire. So when I got past the point of no return, I just turned over and went straight down onto the winch. Luckily enough, this had a massive guard over the top of it that allowed the winch rope to go up it. And I hit this at some place. Whether I was knocked out or not, I don't know. But it was just a heap of balsa wood and canvas. And Sid came out of this winch looking like a blasted porcupine, because this stuff had all gone through the wire and all. And he didn't say like, well, you're a silly boy, but he did tell me something of that nature. However, we raked it all up together. I thought we had put a match to it, but the story was that we had raked it all up and put it in a heap and went back to work. Well, the following Monday morning, in came the sergeant. Didn't come to us at all, but they went to inspect this wrecked glider. And it was heard, perhaps those fellas working on those haymaking machines would seem, oh, they're only a couple of clodhoppers, you don't worry about them. So they never came and asked us, the people who were the culprits of it. But as luck would happen, about a fortnight later, we found that they had an armoured car with the top burnt off. It was an Austin, it was the fastest thing I'd ever seen going on grassland anyway. And they were using that now to pull these gliders up. I think they too must have had a problem with this knob on the end and they hadn't pulled it. Anyway, we got this thing going on the Saturday afternoon, and away we went. And I was up, I flew out over Stormy Down and down over Pyle Garden Centre in that area, and I flew back then over a couple of farms there, coming on the top side of would be the northwest side of the aerodrome. And it was a fantastic feeling, because I'd done a lot of flying after that, but this was something new. And I came in what I thought in a proper manner. I was flying over the hangars. And at that time, and they were there for many years after, they had hangars there with a pitch roof. And I came over between the two of them, and for some unknown reason, and the experts could tell me, that there was no air. And I just floated down quietly on top of this hangar. The two wings went up on the shape of the roof. And there I am standing now on top of the hangar, and I can't get down off the damn thing. Anyway, there was another few choice words, but they threw a wagon rope up, and I hooked it round the down pipe, and I got off. So I have the distinction of having taken off twice and never landed once. So there we are. But no, that's...
But they didn't find out who done that one either, did they?
No, the sergeant came in we were having our breakfast the following morning, and all the niceties were mentioned, and he said the CO has just come in. He said he must have had a heavy weekend, because he said he reckoned he's seen a plane on top of the hangar. And of course he had his back to it, and we all said, well, that one. Well, he turned round and nearly had a fit. Well, they were there about 2.5 days before they got this thing down in bits down there. Again, they never came and asked us to see it, but because we wouldn't be that intelligent, you see, to fly one of these things. But to verify the point, many years ago, it was something about 1966. I was here, and I come home for lunch, and the landlord up in the Pelican rang me up, Mervyn, and he said to me, Baz, there's somebody up here who wants to have a chat with you. Come on up. So anyway, I went up there, and there was an elderly couple sitting down in the corner there, and they come up and introduced themselves. Well, I didn't know them from a bar of soap. He said, we have met before. Now, Mervyn had told him the story, because he said, when the gentleman said that he were down here touring and he served here during the war at Stormy Down, he said, oh, he said, he might have been there when Basil was flying gliders about there. What do you know about gliders? He said, well, not a lot, only what he tells us. He lives next door. I'll get him down, you know. So that was it. And this was the sergeant who came across and had to get it down there. So the past does catch up with you now and again, but in the nicest possible way. But there we are, as I say, that's one of the things you did. We could have had jail for it, I suppose, but you didn't think of that thing. When you
had an interesting youth, Basil, but of course the war was a different time, wasn't it?
Well, I tell you the one thing that has always stuck in my mind. It was coming to the latter part of the war, and opposite the King's Head in Bridgend, there used to be, and I don't know if it's still there, Western Mail and South Wales Echo office.
Yeah.
And 3 of us or 4 of us were coming home as we would on a Sunday evening from the pictures, walking up, and we went over to this window, and I think the 4 of us just stopped talking because the window was full of photographs of Belsen. Now, to this day, you see, I can hardly talk about it because it had an effect on us all. To think that one human being could have done what they did. I had a different look on Germans from that moment on because it was a terrible, terrible thing. Mm-hmm. And we used to walk past there then up to Harris, the fish shop, have a 6 pence worth of chips and a fish. And I don't think one of us said a word, possibly until we had crossed the A48. Mm. But what, you know, from a kid, when the war broke up, when the war started, to be so enthusiastic about what's going to happen, to come to see that, and it brought it down to what this whole thing was about. Jesus, it affected us. And it affected the 4 of us. And whenever we met in gathering, remember that night? I said, don't talk. And you know, there were people then, there was 2 from the village who had been in that first party that went in. And they have said the same, that it was something that affected them for the rest. Not affected them, but it was there. And you only had to think about it. And you well up about it, because we weren't there, but all we were looking at was the photographs. Seen plenty of them since, but that was brought it home to me as what the war was all about. And very, very sad, but there we are. It was a most exciting time in my life, and I remember in the one thing I saw when the army started around Pen-y-bont was really well, Tony, they put a pontoon bridge across the Thames, and they submerged this to about 2 inches below the water surface. And there was a flag put on the side there, and a flag steer. And all these drivers had to do was go straight for those flags, and you were on the bridge because you couldn't see it. And what happened was a dispatch rider went on the wrong side of the flag and disappeared in 17 foot of river. And this officer is shouting on them, because they were getting the dispatch rider, don't worry about him, it's the motorbike, I've only got 1 of them, he said I can get 6 of those. And then I went home and I said to my father, do you know, I said, the army's only got 1 motorbike. And it's down in the Thames, they've got it out now. But no, to him it was the motorbike he wanted. He could get half a dozen dispatch riders. But
well, we did lose a lot of equipment at Dunkirk, but I don't think we were down to 1 motorbike. Thanks ever so much for that, that's great.